It's been several months since the president has sat down for a TV interview. The 60 Minutes interview has created quite a buzz as the president was asked some pointed questions. To assess some of his responses, we sat down with Florida Congresswoman Cammack. Congresswoman Cammack, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to be back.
Congresswoman, President Biden made some news in his interview with 60 Minutes last night. When he was asked about whether or not he was going to run for president, he sort of deflected, but alluded to that he might. What's your takeaway?
Well, I think, historically, if you look at this time of year, presidents are always getting asked, regardless of the Republican or Democrat, are they running again? And the answer is always, well, of course, yes. The continuity for the party's message, for his administration, his agenda has to move forward. But I think there's been so much pressure around his mental health, his cognitive state, the failure to execute an agenda. And I mean, heck, you walk outside down the sidewalk and you can't help but trip over one of his crises that he himself has manufactured. So I know there's a lot of pressure for him not to run, but I think that he has to kind of bob and weave and duck around a little bit. I think for Republicans, it would be wonderful if he ran again.
One thing he did answer directly was when asked about whether or not the United States would back Taiwan militarily. He said that he would. He's been asked that question before, and each time he does answer it directly, but his administration backpedals. What should the U.S. policy be?
It's interesting because we have a long-standing commitment to Taiwan. And you look at our presence in the region, we have a long-standing commitment to the region. And when you talk to our commanders, you look at the precarious situation that we find ourselves in Taiwan, where nearly 90% of the world's semiconductors are manufactured, and of course 80% of the world's trade is running through the Taiwan Straits and throughout the region. This is not just a Taiwan versus China dynamic. This is a global security issue at this point. And so I think you look at the defense sales, you look at the work that we can do to support free trade and deepening our economic ties. There is a longstanding partnership that we have to maintain, and we have a responsibility to do so. And I think China would love nothing more than for the president to say that we won't stand with Taiwan, but we will.
The president was also asked about whether or not the pandemic was over, to which he said that it was. He commented on the fact that no masks were being worn in the facility they were at. What does the pandemic being over translate to you? And a follow-up to that, if indeed it is, should the mandates that the military and others are facing be removed at this point?
In the president's words of the pandemic is over, well, then he needs to relinquish his emergency powers immediately. That means that all of the mandates, all the requirements within the military and the federal service, they need to be pulled back immediately. And I think that there should be a retroactive reckoning for those that lost their jobs because they refused, rightfully so, to take the vaccine for personal reasons, health reasons, religious reasons. Also for those in the military that have been kicked out, who have served our country well and with distinction. They should be given an opportunity to come back into federal service. And then, of course, all the retroactive benefits need to be there as well. So if the pandemic is over, we need to actually act like it. And the federal government needs to get back to normal operating order. And I would love nothing more than to see the Capitol in fully functioning order as well. It's interesting. We've seen out of this administration this notion of it's do as I say, not do as I do. And when you look across the span of the speeches and the work that Biden has done, he's still wearing a mask. He is still operating the administration as though there is a pandemic with people working from home, people refusing to come back in. So he needs to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Congresswoman Cammack, thank you.
Thank you.
An American held prisoner by the Taliban was released. The release was in exchange for a Taliban detainee and coordinated by the Biden administration. U.S. Navy veteran and civilian engineer Mark Freericks was captured by the Taliban at the end of January 2020. He was working as a contracted engineer in Kabul, Afghanistan when he was kidnapped. His release was secured in exchange for a Taliban member imprisoned by the United States for 17 years. He was sentenced for running a wide-reaching heroin smuggling network. Texas will continue sending illegal immigrants by bus to Democrat-run cities. The mayor of El Paso, a Democrat, defends busing the illegal immigrants in an interview with ABC News on Sunday.
We have about 50% of the people today that do not have a sponsor. They don't have money, so we're helping and working to get them to where they want to go. So that's been really important, that we don't send anyone where they don't want to go. We make sure we help them, and we put human beings and we put them on buses with food and make sure they get to their destination.
Texas says it's bused over 2,500 illegal immigrants to New York City since August 5th, while El Paso has sent over 1,100 since August 23rd. Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick told Fox News last week, quote, "We're going to keep those buses coming until finally this administration wakes up." A report issued last month from the Federation for American Immigration Reform found that almost 5 million people have entered the United States illegally since President Biden took office. Virginia released new guidelines on transgender student policies last week. The new guidelines say that public schools cannot affirm a student's gender without parents' written requests. Also, bathrooms and locker rooms have to be used based on a student's sex at birth. Student sports have to be sex-based as well, unless federal laws require otherwise. The new guidelines will take effect after the state superintendent approves the final version. The previous guidelines, which were enacted under Democratic Governor Ralph Northam in March of 2021, define transgender as a student's self-identifying term. The new guidelines on transgender policies in Virginia will enter into a 30-day public comment period later this month. Now here to discuss the new policy, we have Victoria Manning, a school board member in the city of Virginia Beach. Victoria Manning, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Lance.
Victoria, Governor Glenn Youngkin is rewriting the rule to its original form that students in schools must use the bathroom based on the gender that they were assigned at birth. What has been the reaction to this?
You know, I think parents have been wanting this in Virginia. We saw what happened last November when the governor won over the issue of education and parental rights. So I think parents are very thankful that Governor Youngkin's administration has made this decision.
So I guess my question is, when or how did this rule change to allow students to even enter a bathroom based on how they choose to identify?
So in 2021, the state legislature passed a policy allowing the Department of Education to make model policies for transgender students. So those model policies were then given to local school boards who were told they had to implement them. And one of the things in those model policies stated that any child who identified as any sex could go into the bathroom of their choice without being questioned by any staff member. So you could be a boy one day and you could be a girl the next day and choose what bathroom you would enter.
There was a well-known video that went viral, out of context sadly, of a Virginia father being wrestled down to the ground at a school board meeting. The backstory to this was that the father's his daughter was actually sexually assaulted by a man identifying as a woman in a girl's bathroom.
Yeah, so Scott Smith has been through so much, and I'm thankful for him for standing up and fighting for all parents. I'm sure it was so difficult for him to deal with what he went through and what his daughter went through. And I'm so thankful for the governor for standing up for all children so that this doesn't happen again.
Is this an isolated incident, or have there been other cases?
I'm not aware of any other cases in Virginia Beach. However, one thing that I am concerned about is that teachers in our district were being told that they had to keep things from parents. If a child wanted to be called by a different name or a pronoun, a teacher told me that she received an email from a school counselor saying that she was to keep that information from the parents, which is a violation of our state constitution.
And will there be any consequences on the district level if they don't comply with the new changes?
I have not been made aware of whether or not there would be any consequences. I just got my first look at these policies just a few days ago and haven't had a chance to speak with our legal counsel.
Other states throughout the country to follow suit?
Well, I hope so. And we do have some states like Florida who have dug in their heels to stand side by side and shoulder to shoulder with parents. And I'm glad to see that our state, Virginia, is now following suit, and so thankful for Governor Youngkin and his leadership on this issue.
Where does this issue go from here? What other things are you facing and fighting in the state of Virginia?
So we still have very far left extremist school boards here in our state. So we have an election coming up this November where we can change some of that. So I'm working really hard to try to take back control of our Virginia Beach School Board this November. One thing that our local school board just passed a few days ago is a resolution that states that parents are equal partners with the school district. Now that's scary. I never want to be an equal partner with a government entity. Our Virginia Constitution states that parents have the right to make the decisions on the upbringing and education of their children. And for these school districts to create these resolutions and statements that they are equal partners is just very horrific. So we still have an uphill battle here. We have a Department of Education that stands with parents, but we have many local school boards who don't. So people have to pay attention this November and pay attention to who's on the ballot and make sure that you elect people who are going to stand shoulder to shoulder with parents.
Victoria Manning, thank you so much.
Thank you.